My family kicked me out for being poor. I returned as a millionaire. They abandoned me when I had nothing, but fate turned. Now I'm back with power, wealth, and success they never imagined. I still remember the night my father looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You're nothing but a burden." The words hit harder than any slap. I was 19, broke, and desperate for approval, but instead I was told to pack my things and leave. My mother avoided my gaze, my siblings laughed quietly, and I walked out carrying a torn backpack that held my entire world. At first, I thought it was temporary. Maybe they'd call me back after a week, maybe they'd realize how cruel it was to throw their own blood into the streets. But days turned into months, and the only thing that ever came from them was silence. I slept on a friend's couch, then in a cheap hostel, sometimes even in the park. Hunger became my alarm clock. Every night I promised myself one thing: one day, they would regret choosing pride over family. And in a strange way, their rejection became my fuel. Without them, I had nothing left to lose, and that gave me a kind of freedom I'd never known. It was during those hopeless nights that I stumbled into the first opportunity that would change everything. The opportunity came in the form of a dusty little internet cafe. I had gone there just to escape the cold and check job postings. While clicking through endless ads for dishwashing and night shifts, I noticed a man arguing with the cashier about his broken laptop. Out of instinct, I offered to help. I had always tinkered with old computers back home, fixing things my father never even noticed. 10 minutes later, I had the man's laptop running. He stared at me as if I'd performed magic. "Do you do this for a living?" he asked. I almost laughed. "No, sir. I don't even have a job right now." He gave me his card, a small business owner who ran an office nearby. "Come by tomorrow. I could use someone like you." That night, I held on to that card like it was a winning lottery ticket. I didn't sleep, not because I was anxious, but because for the first time since being thrown out, I felt a spark of hope. The next morning, I walked into his office, unsure of what awaited me. And that single step would mark the beginning of a transformation I never saw coming. The office was small, nothing like the glossy corporations I had seen in movies. Just 4 desks, stacks of papers, and buzzing fluorescent lights. But to me, it looked like a palace. The man, whose name was Daniel, introduced me to his assistant and gave me an old computer to work on. "Fix it," he said simply. My hands shook, but once I started, the world around me disappeared. Wires, dust, system errors, all of it felt familiar, almost comforting. An hour later, the machine hummed back to life. Daniel smiled. "You've got talent. I'll pay you for today. If you want to come back tomorrow, I'll have more work." That day I earned $50, more than I'd had in weeks. I walked out of that office holding the cash like it was a crown jewel. From then on, I came every day. First fixing computers, then setting up networks, then troubleshooting software for his clients. Daniel noticed how quickly I learned and encouraged me to study more. At night, I borrowed old textbooks from the library, teaching myself coding and cybersecurity. Each new skill felt like a brick laid in the foundation of a future I was quietly building. And deep inside, one thought kept me alive: one day, I'd return to my family, not as the poor outcast they threw away, but as someone they could never ignore again. The months passed, and with every project Daniel gave me, my confidence grew. Soon I wasn't just fixing computers, I was advising companies on how to protect their data. I stayed late in the office, sometimes working until dawn, drinking cheap coffee and living on instant noodles. But I didn't complain. For the first time in my life, my effort was shaping a future only I controlled. One evening, Daniel leaned back in his chair and said, "You've outgrown this little office, kid. You should think bigger." At first, I didn't understand what he meant. He explained that clients were asking for me directly, not just his company. They trusted me. They believed in me. It was terrifying, the idea of standing on my own feet. But deep inside, I remembered the humiliation of being thrown out of my own home. That pain became courage. I registered my first business with a shaky hand and a heart racing so fast it felt like it would burst. The start was rough: paperwork, taxes, endless rejections from potential clients. But I didn't give up. I knocked on doors, handed out flyers, even offered free work at first just to prove myself. Slowly, calls started coming in. Small shops, then local schools, and eventually bigger contracts. I wasn't rich yet, but something had changed. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building. And for the first time since my family abandoned me, I felt the taste of real independence. By the second year, my company was no longer just me with a backpack of tools. I had hired 2 part-time workers, then 5, then 10. We set up offices in a small rented space, and clients began calling us the go-to team for any IT crisis in the city. I worked like a man possessed. Every sleepless night carried me further from the image of that poor, unwanted kid my family had rejected. I wasn't just earning money anymore, I was building an empire brick by brick. One day, after closing a big deal with a chain of hotels, I went to the bank and stared at my account balance. For the first time in my life, the number wasn't in the hundreds or thousands. It was in the millions. My throat went dry. I remembered sleeping on park benches, eating stale bread, and now, I could buy the very hotel I once couldn't afford to enter. But wealth didn't erase the memory of being cast out. If anything, it sharpened it. Each dollar felt like proof that I had been right all along, that I wasn't useless, that I wasn't a burden. And that's when I made a decision. I wouldn't just live quietly as a millionaire. I would return to the very people who had kicked me out, not for revenge alone, but to show them what they had lost. The chance came sooner than I expected. My younger sister was getting married, and against all odds, I received an invitation. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Why would they want me there after treating me like garbage? But curiosity won. I decided to go. Instead of showing up quietly, I arrived in style. A black car, a tailored suit, a watch that cost more than my father's yearly salary back then. As I stepped out, heads turned. Some relatives didn't even recognize me at first, they whispered, wondering who the stranger was walking so confidently into the hall. Then my mother saw me. Her face drained of color. My siblings froze. And my father, he forced a laugh, the same arrogant tone he used when he threw me out. Well, look who decided to crawl back. But I didn't crawl. I walked straight past him, handed the couple an envelope with a gift so heavy it nearly slipped from their hands, and said calmly, "Consider this a small contribution. From the one you thought would never be anything." The silence in that room was louder than thunder. For the first time, they didn't know what to say. And that was only the beginning of the reckoning. Dinner that night felt like theater. My family tried to act normal, but I saw the glances, my brother eyeing my watch, my cousins whispering about the car parked outside. My mother avoided looking at me, as if ashamed yet too proud to admit it. During the speeches, my father stood up, bragging as always about family values and success built on hard work. His words dripped with hypocrisy, and I couldn't stop the bitter smile curling on my lips. When he sat down, I raised my glass. "I'd like to say something," I began. The room went silent. Years ago, this family told me I wasn't good enough. That I was poor, useless, a burden. And you were right, back then, I had nothing. But being thrown out gave me something far greater than money. It gave me hunger. Hunger to succeed. I paused, letting them squirm. Today, I stand here not as the boy you abandoned, but as a man who built his own fortune. While you laughed at me, I worked. While you ignored me, I grew. And now, I return not for your approval, but to remind you that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. The hall erupted in whispers, some impressed, others shocked. My sister's husband even clapped softly, though Sarah quickly silenced him. My father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. For once, he had no power over me. And in that silence, I realized something: maybe this wasn't just about revenge anymore. Maybe it was about reclaiming the dignity they tried to take away. The rest of the evening unfolded like a storm behind calm walls. On the surface, people danced, laughed, and toasted the new couple. But underneath it all, I felt the stares, the jealousy, the disbelief. Every move I made carried weight. Every word I spoke was dissected. My father tried to salvage control. He leaned in across the table and whispered harshly, "Don't think money erases who you really are. You'll always be that weak boy I kicked out." I met his eyes, steady and cold. "Maybe. But that weak boy is the man paying for tonight's wedding. Did you think the venue discounted this event because of your reputation? No. They called me. And I paid in full." For a moment, the old rage flared in him, but he quickly swallowed it when he realized others were watching. My mother placed a hand on his arm, but her eyes flickered with something else: guilt, maybe regret. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Silence suited her better. Later, as the music slowed, my sister approached me. The same sister who had giggled years ago when I left with nothing but a backpack. She looked beautiful in her gown, radiant even, but her hands trembled when she held her bouquet. "Why did you come?" she asked, voice low, almost pleading. "Because you all thought I'd disappear," I answered. "And I wanted you to see that I didn't. That I became everything you thought I couldn't." Her lips parted, as if to argue, but then she looked down at her diamond ring. Maybe she was wondering if her marriage was built on the same shallow foundation that had once destroyed me. She said nothing, just turned and walked away. And in that moment, I realized something powerful: I wasn't here for their acceptance anymore. I was here for closure. After the wedding, whispers spread fast. Relatives I hadn't heard from in a decade suddenly wanted to reconnect. Cousins asked for investment tips, uncles hinted at business opportunities, and my father tried to arrange a private dinner to talk. But I didn't rush. I let them wait. I let them taste what it felt like to need me, the one they had discarded like trash. Instead, I poured myself into expanding my company. Branches opened in 3 more cities. We launched new services, signed international contracts, and my name started appearing in magazines. The boy who once begged for food was now being interviewed about innovation and leadership. One day, I drove past the house I grew up in. The paint was peeling, the garden overgrown. My father had lost his grip on business, and the family fortune was crumbling. I could have stopped, offered help. Instead, I kept driving. Some debts can't be paid with money. But fate had its own plans. Months later, I received a call. My father was sick, in the hospital. For hours I stared at the phone, debating. At last, I went, not out of duty, but out of curiosity. When I walked into the room, he looked smaller, fragile, almost unrecognizable. For the first time in my life, he didn't speak with arrogance. He just whispered, "You proved me wrong." And hearing that, I understood: I didn't need revenge anymore. I had already won. Standing there, I saw the full circle of my journey. I was once the boy they laughed at, thrown into the streets with nothing. Now, I was the man who had carved his destiny from ashes and turned pain into power. I left the hospital that night not with bitterness, but with clarity. I didn't need their love. I didn't need their approval. I had built my own family in the people who stood by me, in the employees who trusted me, in the friends who became my true brothers and sisters. Yes, I returned as a millionaire. But more importantly, I returned whole. Free. And that, more than the money, was the true victory.